Hey listeners, before we start proceedings this week, it's desperate times because the new Tool album has been out for weeks now, and because each copy costs £14,000 and comes on 27 CDs and has to be couriered to your home
from the moon.
Unfortunately, we've not yet heard a copy, and even though it reportedly sounds exactly like everything else they've ever done, just not as good, we desperately need it to remain at the cutting edge of music journalism. So please contribute generously to enable us to fully grasp the wonders of, what's it called?
Fear Inoculum.
We've also just discovered that American Express VIP tickets to the Weezer Green Day Fall Out Boy.
Stop saying Weezer. There's no H in it.
I should know that because it's very close to my name, but I never really say my own name. So, Weezer Fall Out Boy Green Day tickets in Glasgow. The VIP package is £579 each. So
we'd like to have 3, please.
What do you think that involves? A VIP package, ostensibly a punk rock, alternative rock show.
I know, sponsored by American Express.
Fun.
Macaroni pies.
If anybody from American Express is out there and wants to sponsor our show, that's absolutely fine by us because it's you're punk approved. But yeah, go to unsungpod.net/donate
and feed our voracious musical habits.
Oh yeah. Hi, welcome to the Unsung Podcast. How you guys doing this week?
Woo!
Woo!
Yeah! Woo!
I am hyped. I'm actually allergic to something. I don't know. I've just started sneezing like mad now.
I think it's false metal.
The studio. Yeah, I know. I'm allergic to false metal.
I'm a little bit sore. I'm showing my age with a sore leg that's currently raised.
What have you done?
Just did myself a mischief trying to pretend I'm a younger man.
So one of those little things where you just wake up in the morning and something's just sore and you're like, what the fuck, man? Like,
no. How have you been? What have you guys been doing? No politics this week. Nothing happened. Politics was frozen.
Yeah, politics is dead.
Yes, finally.
There's nothing happening.
It tired itself out.
It's just, maybe it's just become so fucking ridiculous that we're like, is that it?
Yeah,
that's surprisingly tame.
It's like one of those episodes of Sopranos where you're like, what happened? I don't know.
The bottle episode.
So what did you do that wasn't gawping in horror at the news?
Yeah, I went to London.
Okay.
To the building of News UK, funnily enough, which is the fucking belly of the beast, right outside the Shard. It's part of the Shard complex. Lovely building. That's all I've got to say about that.
Was that still owned by Rupert?
Why?
Oh aye.
Well,
we had a conference there, and there was like 120 people that were coming in, and there's, in order to get in the building, you need to go through an airport scanner, and there's only one airport scanner, and every single person's got to be signed in by a member of staff. So there's like a queue for an hour just to get into like our wee conference. That's 120 people.
That builds anticipation, though. It makes it feel like you're going to something that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. That's not how I felt at the time.
See, Robert Mugabe died.
Yeah,
that's all right.
Again,
do you know? It's really interesting seeing the news reaction to that, because apparently he's a strong man who had ups and downs, and I'm pretty sure that when I was a kid, the narrative was that he was a fucking mad dictator who murdered loads of people.
Yeah, I mean,
and then even just 5-10 years ago, it was all about the popular, movement to remove him from power.
It's a funny,
somehow that narrative has changed in the UK media. It's a funny old
story, though. A lot of the African regimes have that, though. It's like Gaddafi as well. When he first took over, folk were like, yes, it's freedom fighters, like the Che Guevara thing. It's like freedom fighters, and then the longer they're freedom fighters and they have power and they have a bit too much power and they just want to hold on to it, and then they get mental. And then Zimbabwe obviously became synonymous with attacks on white farmers and general shenanigans. Someone declared shenanigans.
Somebody did declare shenanigans, and Mugabe finally was the last it.
Yeah, but
to be tagged.
How old's Rupert Murdoch?
Must be in his 80s.
He's also a strong man, right?
I would say he's a strong man. Yeah, I mean, the British press have been up and down on him.
I did see
He's still married to Jerry Hall.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot that.
She has got a thing for bastards, hasn't she?
Well, yeah, I know.
So what else did you do? I went to see some music.
I got a Prince tattoo finally. Really, really poor timing.
Problematic.
Totally jinxed it. I was actually speaking to Kyle about it when I was getting tattooed. I was like, I hope it doesn't turn out that something's bad about him. And then a week later, Oh shit. I've totally fucked it, lads.
I can sound the Prince alarm and the cancelled alarm at
the same time.
Prancelled.
Wow.
Love it. What bands did you go see?
Problematic. I went to see what I thought was a fairly innocuous event. I was just being supportive of, friend of a friend, go and see his band, see how they're doing. They were fine. It was more the fact that the main act, I think there's a fair chance I accidentally watched a Nazi band. I'm not sure yet, but it was like there were a lot of pennies dropping during the show. I believe I was giving you guys live updates.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that their logo, their S, looked suspiciously...
No, it's an R.
Is it an R?
It's an R.
Was suspiciously...
Swastika-esque.
Swastika-esque.
Yeah,
it's geometry.
It was somewhere between a swastika and the Golden Dawn Greek R that the neo-Nazis used there as well. It's like almost immediately in between the two. And that kind of... I was like, I don't know about this. This is pagan black metal, I was like, I've read a bit about black metal.
We've done the podcast on that.
I was like, I'm going to read further. Actually, I've pulled up their Wikipedia, which is like a weird Wikipedia. I don't know what it is, if it's translated or whatever, but they're from Russia. They have 2 murder allegations to their name.
You can't be black metal with a murder allegation.
These guys got 2. The main person in the band, so the band's called Satarial, and I don't know, they might be nothing of the sort. That just seemed that there's a lot of weird things pointing in weird directions for them. They have been accused of, I don't know about prosecuted, but certainly accused of church burning, grave desecration, but also Lord Seth, the guy in the band.
Seth.
It's Lord Seth.
Wow.
he was a character, by the way.
That sounds like somebody who's just won a Quake Online competition.
He was like somewhere between the dwarf from Lord of the Rings and Brian Blessed. And he was, so he was charged with murder, and then acquitted. Then there's some of the quotes in this Wikipedia, by the way. I'm assuming it must be a translation, but the first in Russia, the festival devoted to the unholy Black Mass, the Christian terrorist shoots in member of the band Satarial, ... After that, comma, the composition of group changes and comes a new drummer, Demogorgon.
Well, I'd love to hear their story.
Oh man, there's some awesome quotes from this Wikipedia. They had a bunch of records. In 2005, they released something called Transmit Todd. Satarial ceases to be a band group and begins to actively touring. In 2006, Angel Bust, which is the drummer, I think, the blonde drummer who looks like she's straight out of like Made in Chelsea or something, as an accused of committing ritual murder, full stop, brackets, space, it was false, comma, unfounded charges by the government of the prosecution. I think the Wikipedia editor is editorialising here to some extent.
It sounds a little bit
A Russian
unbalanced.
court relieves the charges for lack of evidence. After this, Satarial partied with the drummer and bassist, and Seth will be releasing a solo experimental album under the name Latex. So it was an experience, and the more I read about it, the more I was kind of like, and then there's a third member, a girl who was really just master of ceremony, and she came out with like a candelabra on her head and like all kind of flouncy clothes, and then had what looked like a very convincing human skull that she filled with wine, and then passed around the audience for the audience to drink from. Bearing in mind there's only about 25 people watching this band, but it was a very convincing human skull, and when I saw the bit about the grave desecration, I was like, I'm not going to join in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Very, very hygienic. Sounds like it was.
But it was not really what I expected on a Sunday.
Were they any good?
No. No,
I'm glad that they weren't.
They were not particularly good. They were just the oddest bunch. So that was probably the highlight.
Great. What have you been doing, Dave?
I haven't been to any gigs. I've just kind of been pottering, actually.
You had a birthday?
I had a birthday, made a big chili. Turns out I have 34 hot sauces.
Wow. So
it was just an excuse to try out my hot sauces. And then I actually made my own one, and I would put it on quite high on the sphincter destroyer scale. It was very good though. I put some Buckfast in it. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
So that's why you had that miniature of Buckfast.
Yeah.
I thought you were just having a wee drink up an necro like I used to do when I was 16.
So I thought I would give you guys a nice easy couple of weeks, try to digest a 96-minute experimental electronic album.
I mean, it actually wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Good.
So that was a pleasant surprise.
This is a podcast about The Knife, and this is the album Shaking the Habitual from 2013.
Their final record, apart from some remix stuff.
But this is not a podcast about Fever Ray or other offshoots and projects, because Fever Ray is a project in its own right with multiple records and very possibly something that will come up at some point because it's got a lot going for it. So we're trying to like stick just to the knife in this, the way we did with Parliament and Funkadelic, and keeping things delineated before people start freaking out about how good Fever Ray stuff is. Yes, we agree.
Yes.
But The Knife are a very, very interesting band, and a band I didn't really give enough credit to because they're a band I digested in dribs and drabs, not necessarily sequentially, not album by album. Maybe because of the time they came out when streaming was becoming such a big thing, and it was just much easier to pick them up here and there rather than, pick up a CD just in one. And I suppose everybody associates the first time they heard The Knife with that song Heartbeats, right? Or almost everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember if it was that or if it was The Mother We Share, because I remember really loving the video for The Mother We Share and I had it as my remember there was a little flash box on Bebo that you could put like your favourite YouTube video or whatever on your Bebo page. What are you, Chris? You're looking at me in a funny way.
I'm trying to very tactfully not mention the fact that you've quoted the Church's song.
Oh yeah,
I was actually about to say that as well.
Well, what's it called again? I can't fucking remember.
I believe was pointed out to them as well.
We
share our mother's health.
We share our mother's health. See, it's because I'd been thinking about that Church's song because I think they were quite obviously influenced by it. And I remember when that Church's song came out and it was the big one, people were talking about how it's like a sort of move from The Knife, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, Bebo. Remember Bebo?
I do, actually, yeah.
That is just changing the subject.
I'm going back to the subject that I was on before I fucked it up, but yeah,
I'm leaving all that in. Including
fine.
the awkward silence.
We share our mother's health. I remember I had a really cool animated video, and I had that as my Bebo profile video. So that must have been 2006.
Yeah. It was.
And I think I don't know if when was that Sony advert out?
2003.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Did it come out the same year?
Yeah, Jose Gonzalez, kind of his one stab at fame. He was also Swedish, I think, but I think his claim to fame came from covering Heartbeats, which was then his version was featured in an advert for Sony Bravia TVs.
The start a simple touch, one night to push and scream, and then relief, 10 days of perfect tunes, the colors red and blue.
But do you know what? He's actually, that album's actually pretty good. It's got some nice stuff on it. Crosses is a really good song by him on that album, and I believe it's on the Red Dead Redemption soundtrack.
Guide you through your weakest moments to leave them behind you. Returning nightmares only.
and there's a bit when you're riding across the Mexican border and there's a Jose Gonzalez track that comes in. It might not
I remember that, yeah.
it might not be that song, but there's a Jose Gonzalez track that comes in as you're riding across the Mexican border, and it's fucking perfect. It's like one of the best moments in a video game. But yeah, like
agree.
Better than Mario Kart.
I mean, Mario Kart, Rainbow Roads, it's difficult to beat, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, that advert really fucking brought them to the masses.
Yeah, and a lot of people work backwards towards the knife. The knife are Karen and Olof Dreyer. Is it Dreyer? I think we're going to go with Dreyer. I don't speak Swedish.
Yeah, that's fine.
Dreiger.
Dreyer.
From Gothenburg. The band was formed in 1999.
They are brother and sister.
Karen was originally in a band called Honey is Cool. Honey is Cool broke up around about 99-2000 and had been together since 94. They had a couple albums and EPs. It's much more of an indie thing. Actually, some of the lyrics from Honey is Cool appear on the Deep Cuts album, which we'll quickly talk about shortly. But yeah, kind of indie electro-pop, a bit more kind of odd and niche. One thing we're going to be really clear, a big part of this podcast we're going to mention is gender politics.
I probably shouldn't have said brother and sister, just siblings.
No, they're brother and sister, but Karen chooses the pronoun Z, so we're going to try to make sure we stick with that. So, and also another thing to be clear about is that we are covering the full version of Shaking the Habitual today, not the shortened version.
There is a shortened version.
There is a shortened version which excludes the track Old Dreams Waiting to be Realised, which is a mega 19-minute instrumental thing in the right bang slap in the middle of it, and that came out in one disc, whereas the other one is a double disc. But we are covering the full version, so let's just get clear about that.
You gotta love a bloody double album, eh?
Well, I think there's so much to talk about with the knife. They're really interesting on a lot of levels. When I said it earlier on, I hadn't really given them credit. They're such a fucking punk band in the kind of abstract, kind of conceptual sense of the word punk. Like, they are constantly doing the unexpected, breaking norms. They're just a very subversive band in a lot of ways. Not to mention one of the other points, like I said, gender politics is a big part of them, and what I think is the other biggest part of the knife is the fact that they went from a commercial start sounding like a pop band to sounding like an extremely anti-pop band by the time they did this record. And that's why this record really stands out so much to me, is that this is a band that by the time of Heartbeats, which was the first song in their second album, they could have become one of a long line of mega selling Swedish electronic pop acts. They could have kept writing to this huge audience that would have just lapped that stuff up. But with every subsequent record, they pushed further and further and further out into these uncharted territories, combining weird techno with drone, with ambient, with like really odd glitchy electronica, and goth and industrial, and they got less and less and less palatable. And a lot of people went with them as well. Their first outing as the Knife was 2001 in the self-titled album. It was not actually released, and neither I think was Deep Cuts. They weren't released in the USA until 2006.
Yeah,
when
that's
Mute
right.
put them out there. Yeah, but I'd heard stuff from them back then, and certainly when Deep Cuts came out, you heard that a lot of places. But the first one is it's naive. We use that word a lot, but it is naive. It's a band that are sort of just arriving. What do we do? What are we doing? How is this project going to pan out?
Yeah, they're finding their sound, and it doesn't sound particularly exceptional in terms of the sort of electronic pop stuff that's around at that time.
There's an awful lot of ideas in it. Like, it's quite scattered. It's the first track in it, Neon, to me sounds really quite Bjorky.
Coming back for more.
It's got this weird sax riff on it and stuff. There are loads of nice bits. The second track, Lasagna, I think is the one that most people picked up in it.
Charlotta making lasagna with me above the clouds, but you could have waited.
It's got a couple of nice hooks in it, but I think it's actually probably best known just for the fact that, as he says, lasagna. Kino, third track, has the first appearance of their steel drum.
I heard a puff, I heard a blow, I felt the ground, I felt the snow, I thought of rain and I race, and never really saw the sky. I heard a grunt, I heard a moan, I felt the sand, I saw the moon, I saw the northern light.
Very Genesis.
Which becomes a real recurring feature in later stuff. The fourth track in that one, actually, I Just Had to Die, I think it's the nicest one on it.
Somebody saw me watching schoolgirls on their knees, but I don't know why.
It's a really sweet little bit of music, but it's really a band finding themselves. The album itself feels a wee bit throwaway, and the only other thing that really jumped out from that record for me is that it demonstrates some of the early experiments with vocal pitch shifting.
For you, and I'm glad I found thee a special kind of personality. Yes, you are the crusader, you are the lady.
And the vocal pitch shifting isn't just for the knife, it isn't just a meaningless musical technique. It speaks to the gender politics of the band, it speaks to gender identities, it speaks to a lot of what Karen believes.
It also sort of dehumanizes it a little bit.
Yeah.
Adds this sort of odd ambiguity to it.
Yeah, it's weird that a technique that is otherwise used by bands simply as a musical device has a sort of political significance in the context of this band. Deep Cuts was 2003. 2003 was an unbelievably busy year for this band, actually. Deep Cuts came out early in the year. It was a massive breakthrough for them.
I must have had this record because I know this record really well and I remember having it at uni, so I must have had this before.
I'd originally picked Deep Cuts for this because I think Deep Cuts, albeit it's well known and it established them, but in the context of international pop, it's not a particularly huge album, even though it probably in places really deserved to be. It's very, very heavily front loaded though. I think that's part of why
there's too many tracks on it. It's too long.
It is too long. They actually brought out a version of it that was even longer. They had another 4 tracks on an extended version.
But there are some, that's it. There are some brilliant tracks on it, but they are nearly all at the beginning. Yeah. Like, obviously, it kicks off with Heartbeats. I really like Girls' Night Out.
It's a really good opening riff. It's a lot darker though, because Heartbeats is so sweet. Yeah. It's quite it's a dead upbeat, and you're like, is this the direction that this band's going in? And then Girls' Night Out immediately darkens everything down.
But the whole album has still got this like quite shiny gloss to it, and it's obviously quite heavy on the steel drums as well. Yeah. Like I was trying to think, talking about Shaking the Habitual is like a pure ketamine album.
Oh yeah.
Silent Shout is an Ecce album, and I feel like Deep Cuts is like an Aperol Spritz album. It is dark, but just a little bit tipsy at the beach.
Yeah, I think they're a band that love to pretend they're going in one direction and then fake you out, because by the third track, Pass This On, which is a really quite measured, slow, quite beautiful ballady type thing in an electronic fashion, it starts with that great line, I'm in love with your brother, what's his name? It's just a really fucking cool song. Like it's a sign of a band that has got way more going on. That they've got a lot more ideas in the tank. The steel drum. By the way, those steel drum sounds are an example of something called wavetable synthesis, where you don't start from scratch with the synthesizer. Like analog synthesizers, where you're kind of you're literally modulating a sine wave or whatever. It's wavetable synthesis. You start with a sample, and then you're modulating and modifying from there. So that's how you get very distinct, unusual tones from that. And it also allows you to do that thing where you can, for example, sample a vocal pattern and then bastardize it to the point where it becomes percussive. And they do a lot of that later on in their career.
Definitely,
Track 5 in that, The Cop, is dark as fuck. stripped down, really evil sounding, short. And that's what I mean. Like you said, even though it's an overall quite an upbeat and shiny album, it has these really sinister, odd moments of it that are designed to unsettle you. Listen Now, the 6th track, was really maligned in a lot of reviews, I noticed when I was reading back over how this album landed. It does have these silly techno drum rolls in it, but it's got some fucking brilliant hooks in that song as well. And I almost kind of feel like they knew how good that song was, and they threw those drum rolls in there to be sort of childish. There's a silliness to it, because you can tell they're obviously mature enough songwriters to know that is not necessarily a sensible thing to do, but they've done it anyway. And I can only assume that based on the evidence that they knew exactly what they were doing with that. You Make Me Like Charity is this weird oddball sort of later track. I think it appears about 10 or 11. It's got some great vocals in it. And the second half of the album just generally has like diminishing returns until track 12, Got to Let You, is this another example of that gender bending pitched vocal thing.
I know she lets me down, but just for a short while, then she changes her mind. I know she...
It's a really interesting record, actually. I think when I first approached it from the perspective of this is just a great synth pop electronic album with some weird touches.
It's a lot better than LaRue.
I didn't. It's definitely not. But I didn't realise how sinister it was. I think that's the thing. I think you have to, like, this whole period though, like the knife through like Robin and LaRue, like there was like an era of like really interesting, independently written synth pop with non-masculine front people, if we'll put it that way.
Yeah,
like there was a really interesting undercurrent, and it was in dribs and drabs. It wasn't like a torrent, but they were people that were achieving certain amounts of success, but coming from places of actually non-committee written. And okay, the likes of Robin did get picked up and stuff, and they did try and become a bit more of a kind of produced project. But
at the same time, you had Crystal Castle sort of stuff. You had Goldfrapp went more sort of mainstream, and it, like, quite often there's a Scandinavian or European sort of background to a lot of these artists as well.
I mean, Sweden is ridiculous because of the prominence of the music industry in Sweden, the pop music industry in Sweden. That whole thing about the Swedish mafia, we've covered it in the earlier episodes of the show, but the prominence of Swedish songwriters, even in the big American artists, guys like Dr. Luke and Max Martin and stuff like that, and it's insane. And then when you obviously go back through bands like Roxette all the way back to ABBA, and it's the country has a crazy consistency in terms of big synthy stadium pop. It's mental. That same year, they also released the official soundtrack to a film called Hannah Med H. Which actually looks like a pretty cool film. I've never seen it, but I had to read about it before this. The soundtrack's mostly instrumental, but does have a few cuts from deep cuts on it. It sounded pretty good. It was a bit more throwaway, maybe like a collection of demos, if you were being totally honest. And they also did a thing called Tomorrow in a Year.
By the bank of some great stream,
which was an opera score for an interpretation of Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, written in conjunction with a couple other artists. I know that Anthony Fantano hates it with a passion, as much as he's a massive fan of the band. He thinks that's fucking dreadful. I believe it got very, very mixed reactions. I'm not massively familiar with it. I've listened to it a wee bit.
I remember when it came out, and I tried to give it a go just because it was the knife, and was it Planet Rock as well? Who's really good?
Planet Rock's on it. It's epic. Me, but it's like another 90-minute plus one, but without the sort of deliberate sort of sense of purpose that this one has. Silent Shout 2006. Silent Shout was like a big watershed for them in terms of can they follow that kind of modest hints at brilliance that were on Deep Cuts. Pitchfork called this the best album of 2006. It's about 11 tunes, 48 minutes. It didn't feel as padded as maybe Deep Cuts did, especially in the second half. Artistically, it's a pretty consistent album. I feel it has like some really big moments, although I do find the second half a little bit underwhelming. Not as much so as the second half of Deep Cuts, but I do think the second half has less standout ideas than the first half of it. Obviously the tune Silent Shout, the first one, is just a superb intro, really darker, sexier. People weren't sure what direction Knife was going to go in. It's not typical pop at all. It's not trying to be like Heartbeats.
It's way more club, dark, techno sort of stuff. It's like, oh yeah, they're going to Berghain now.
It has this really beautiful modulated arp and that pitch shifted multi-track vocal thing happening again, which is designed to unsettle. And it's at this point that you realise you can already see the trend of the Knife starting all their albums in a sweet way and immediately getting dark, and then the next one starts sweet but gets darker again, and then the next one starts sweet and gets darker again. This is a band that is pushing further and further and further out to sea, away from what could have been a pretty sort of throwaway synth pop project, and that really sets them apart. It sets them apart from a lot of bands that cite them as influences. Maybe bands like Churches are a good example of that, who went in completely the opposite direction from them, starting with this kind of like indie kind of cred, but then just these guys just got dark and artistic and esoteric. You know, I mean, way back when they did The Knife, for example, they were already wearing like their Venetian masks and their plague masks and their crow masks. Yeah. This whole thing about how neither wanted to be judged on their appearance, neither wanted the appearance of them as people to influence how the band's music was received, and so they actually went full theatre with it instead and made the appearance and the portrayal a part of the whole artistic performance rather than it being them as commodity. It's quite an interesting approach. Then Neverland on that is a really sort of distinct Knife track with the steel drum synths again. Couple of great motifs. It's faster, it's a wee bit more akin to their earlier stuff, but more upbeat. The Captain, the third track in that, is a perfect illustration again of them getting really obscure. Totally experimental, really mature, really weird, and evolves very, very slowly over the course of quite a long runtime into something quite beautiful by the end of it. And I think it's the sign of a band that is like really quite special. At this point, you can see they are not doing anything that you expect them to do. I mean, this is the third track on this album that should be like this is your moment, guys. This is when you need to land, and you're doing this, and it's pretty amazing. Like, it's a really brave move. Like you said, We Share Our Mother's Health, number 4. That was a big single for them. Pretty iconic tune due to the way the vocal samples slowly kind of turn into a metallic percussive pattern, like we were talking about earlier, that wavetable synthesis, where they've sampled Karen's vocals and maybe Olaf's as well, I'm not sure, and then they've chopped them, bastardized them, shortened them, extended them, compressed them. Often you can't tell that you're listening to a vocal until filters change. There's also a really nice bass synth in that tune that arrives. The only other one that I would really pick out in terms of landmarks would be Forest Families later on, which has this beautiful arp. The later part of the record has a lot of the really gender-bending vocal mods. Karen really goes to town in that, and I think makes a lot of effort to be as unsettling and awkward as possible. Like, I think the vocals are used to counterbalance sometimes quite pretty music.
We want you to sing us a song, and when we come home, we put the curtains down, making sure that the TV is on.
To avoid it becoming too saccharine. I think it's fucking excellent. It can be hard listening at times, and a lot of people I know are put off by the jarring nature of some of the vocal takes, but I think it's quite important to where the band lands creatively. So yeah, so I think, like, as I said, there's two real key themes to the Knife, and I think the first one to really talk about is that progression away from pop, that they chose to do something as anti-commercial as that. And as I said, I think the word punk, if it means anything now, because it certainly doesn't mean fast 3-chord guitar music, if it is to mean anything, it's a really punk approach to that. I wanted to ask you guys if you could think of any bands off the top of your head that did similar things, like started off with potentially commercial sounds, but then got more and more and more esoteric as they went on. See who occurred to you. I mean, an obvious one, in my opinion, is Radiohead, and I think there's actually quite a few parallels with Radiohead and the Knife. I think if you take, like, the first album's quite cheesy and naive, has some okay ideas but also a bit annoying at times. Second album's a breakthrough and has some big singles on it. Third album, which obviously in Radiohead's case would be OK Computer, is like this massive critical success, a bit like Silent Shout. And then OK, the Knife do this 96-minute epic album that we're now talking about in the form of Shaking the Habitual. Radiohead, Kid A and Amnesiac were the same sessions, so if you kind of group them together, they then pushed way out to sea and started doing these really, really obtuse bits of music. And I think there is like a parallel to the trajectories that their careers took to some extent. I think it's to the credit of both bands as well, because it gave them a longevity and a sort of a credibility that maybe others lack. It might contrast, for example, with a band like Tool. And Tool were a band that maybe early on had this sort of slightly stodgy sound, had this second proper album that was a big breakthrough with big singles, really promised big things, but could also have gone in a sort of slightly cheesy direction, went in a more esoteric direction with Lateralis, and it was good, very rewarding. However, unlike the Knife and maybe Radiohead, Tool then got into this just cycle right up until recently of just repeating the same thing.
Well, they did it twice. It took them 13 years, and they just repeated Lateralis with diminishing returns. Yeah,
and in a grand fashion as well, in these long, sprawling records. And I think that's a distinction that's worth making, that this band especially kept pushing out into those territories. And yeah, okay, it's not 13 years, but they took their time to get something that they thought was worthwhile. And like 2013, it was a long wait. And originally, apparently, they weren't even going to release it as the Knife. They thought it was so different, but then changed their mind on that and decided it was a stronger statement to put it out under the Knife, because it would hopefully challenge the people that they'd already brought in this journey with them anyway. But yeah, but like thinking about other bands that did that, I always thought Aphex Twin was kind of like that, because I think Aphex Twin could easily have cashed in on...
Oh yeah, when you think about the mid-90s sort of dance boom, and you've got like The Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and Fatboy Slim.
Exactly.
And then Aphex Twin releases Drugs, and then fucks off for 15 years. It's I mean, he's sort of one of those ones that doesn't really give a fuck. I think we've mentioned her, but Bjork as well.
I've got her written down as well.
You had Oh So Quiet, that was, mid-90s.
And even Army of Me, it was in the context of an era of alternative rock, and Bjork could have stuck to that, but got more and more and more and more bizarre. I mean, extremely experimental at times. But also as a result, these are both artists that have unimpeachably credible credentials.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They are held up as examples of like musical credibility for doing that.
Another band that I can think of that kind of did that, who were absolutely huge, and they took all mainstream success, but then they decided to fuck with it. No, Blur.
Yeah.
Like they were, you released Country House in 1995 or 96, and then when you move down to stuff like Think Tank and Blur actually is a great album. It's got like Beetlebum. Beetlebum is nothing like.
I really like the song Beetlebum.
Like
I don't think it's to the same extent as
no, but I remember I bought that Blur record in 1997 on cassette, and that's because Great Escape 2 years earlier had like Charmless Man, The Universal, Country House on it, like huge pop tunes, and then 2 years later they come out with Blur, and it's got like Country Sad Ballad Man, MOR, like although it has
Chinese
song
Bombs.
It's got song 2 on it as well, but like that album's really quite it's like quite depressing and inward, and it wasn't a pop record in any way. And like the battle with Oasis throughout the 90s, Oasis just went down the we're going to copy the Beatles pop tunes route. Blur just went, oh, let's just fuck about.
I definitely agree that Blur took a chance with that. I think they didn't see it through though. I don't think they continued in the same way as the likes of Bjork. And I would say a band like Portishead as well. Yeah. Portishead could easily, after the critical reception early on, could easily have just kept doing that. But obviously with Third, by that point, they were completely out there. I think Pink Floyd qualify. I mean, Pink Floyd were like maybe the master template of that, sort of starting as this quite sort of hokey 60s kind of band and then becoming this insane prog thing that was doing some pretty weird stuff in some of its later records by any standards, let alone the standards of the time.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
I don't know if they
did sell a lot of records.
but then again, so have a lot of these bands. That's the thing. Radiohead. I mean, Radiohead, I think one of the points I was trying to make with this was that
it doesn't
maybe
necessarily
counterintuitively, the bands that do it and commit to it and do it well, like PG Harvey is another one, Aphex Twin, Bjork, Radiohead, Portishead and The Knife have lasted. They've stayed relevant and they've shifted units and they've done reasonably well.
But then, see, there's another level to this where it's like a balance of bands that then disappear up their own arse.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to do the experimental thing, but in actual fact they don't have the chops to do it. And they've maybe gone mainstream. I mean, I'm just talking about Biffy Clyro now.
So Biffy Clyro did exactly what I was saying, which is gravitate the opposite way. So Biffy Clyro started out,
but then they got to the stage of success where they were like, oh, let's go and do the mad double album and stuff. But then you're like, oh no, that's not. You're doing a double album at the wrong stage of your career. But
in terms of material, the stuff started out much more unusual and experimental, and then
absolutely.
Just the convergence was just easily digestible. That became the priority, like to the wider and wider and wider base, and I think that tends to be the overwhelming trend.
Mark, any punk bands or hardcore bands that you can think of?
I know they're totally cancelled, but Brand New is probably a good example. Because they went from being really big emo band, and they could have been even bigger, but they just went weirder and weirder and weirder, and then they were releasing noise rock records by the end of it, which is like completely not at all what they were doing.
They didn't go down the My Chemical Romance or Jimmy Eat World route.
Completely ignored that entirely and just went their own path and treated their fans shit along the way a lot of the time as well, by taking piss out of them a lot. But they did go, and they still retained that fan base. I mean, the last time they played here, they sold at the bars, do you know what I mean? So they were still selling records, they were still on a decent label.
Yeah, they had credibility, apart from the fact that he's a beast.
Totally cancelled.
I think if you're listening and you can think of other bands that have started out and promising kind of mainstream, success, and maybe haven't failed, but have certainly pushed off in more artistically nuanced directions, it'd be good to get to hear them, because I was kind of racking my brains a little bit. It's not something you can particularly Google, it's pretty hard to work it, but it'd be good to hear what people have to contribute. Karen had said, I do not believe I have a right to make a living making music. So Z was admitting that it's better, in their opinion, to pursue the artistic credibility of it and not assume that somehow the industry owes you this debt. I really love that. I think it's meaningful. There's sincerity to it. The band maintained a political nature. They were dangerous. They are dangerous. There's something really unnerving about them. Unsettling, certainly the live performances, challenging. So that was one big facet. And the other big facet of them is that they have this, they're very outspoken in gender politics. I believe Olaf studied gender studies in Stockholm. Karen is well documented in their beliefs. especially as relates to the ratio of women to men in music. They twice refused to attend the Swedish Grammys for that exact reason, at one point sending 2 of the Guerrilla Girls, which is this American sort of anonymous, I don't know what you call it, a collective that's designed to highlight the inequalities in various industries, especially in the arts. So certain, like, releasing lists of museums based on the percentage of the art within the museum that is by women or non-binary persons, as opposed to men. So I think that part of the band has hugely lent to the credibility and the longevity of them, because they stand for something. They stand for something that's quite difficult to digest, quite a complex subject. They're not just pop
music, or they're not just club music.
And it's not you two complaining about, oh, let's not go to war, which is quite a glib thing, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be said, but it is quite glib. They're addressing quite a difficult subject that is quite alienating to a lot of people, even people that will eventually get there. They can struggle with it, but they've really stuck with it. They've also done things like, I think at one point the Knife were teaching at a summer school to try and introduce young girls to electronic music. Karen has quoted in at least one interview that I read, Judith Butler, that quote, "We are always in drag," Judith Butler, the feminist author, and trying to relate that to the Knife's very extrovert general aesthetic. So music is performance, but gender is performance too, and maybe even in fact using one of those to try and redress the imbalance with the other. Details like the choice of the directors and their videos. I think one of the videos was done by a queer porn director and is, pretty NSFW. But I think there's videos for loads of their songs, if not almost all, at one point. Karen's spoken quite a bit about endorsements and advertising. I mean, although they did fairly well out of that early association via Jose Gonzalez, they
used that to then set up the record label
to empower themselves and others through that. And they've also been very, very careful with what they'll allow themselves to be associated with since. And Karen's point was that to live in a feminist manner involves more than just what you say, it's what you do, and it involves the way you sort of tacitly endorse things by association. So if you believe there is injustice in an industry or within a company or within a series of companies or practices, don't endorse them, don't become involved with them. And that's why there's so little in terms of sync with Knife music, because they are not comfortable with the practices of these companies and see taking money from them or allowing their music to be played alongside it, much in the same way Steve Albini and Ian Mackay have said. They see that as an endorsement, an association with their methods, and they're not going to do that. Even if people are like, oh, it's just money, make a living, they don't believe you're entitled to necessarily make a living if it involves those kind of compromises and sacrifices. So they seem to also demonstrate, though, at the same time, that's quite serious stuff, heavy-handed. They seem to demonstrate a fair amount of self-awareness. So I think the fact there's a lyric which is something about liberals giving me a nerve itch, aware of the kind of, for example, Karen has commented on how there's still a lot of work to be done within the Me Too movement, that it was obviously very, very well intentioned. There was a lot of positives to come from it, but it also needed to refine its methods, and there were things it could do better. So I think there's just so much going on with the band in that sense, and it must be really refreshing. I'm saying this as a white male. It must be really refreshing as a young woman or a non-binary person to find a band that's representing you, that's a great band, that is going out on a limb for you, sacrificing stuff, sacrificing easy money, saying we're not going to take that money because we don't think you're treating these people well. That's so fucking good, so encouraging that there are bands out there that aren't just for sale and are still creatively rewarding. I think it's awesome.
I wonder what they say having their music synced in Ugly Betty, which was an ABC show. That's interesting, I think.
Well, they've had their music synced into Handmaid's Tale as well, but I think a lot of that was to do with the messaging inside the shows themselves.
Hulu and Disney, Hulu and ABC, both owned by Disney. Interesting.
As I understand, though, the compromise that they were comfortable with there was that the messages themselves within those shows were suitably subversive and high profile, that there was a net gain. I think it's good just to know that they're putting that amount of thought into those decisions. And I don't I as much as I'm very, very uneasy with a lot of sync, I don't think people shouldn't sync with stuff, especially other creative ventures like TV shows, films, art, whatever. But yeah, you have to give it the thought, like, is this one worth syncing with? I think syncing with Handmaid's Tale, especially when it's used as well as it was used in that, I think it's episode 9 of season 1, when Moira, the character, breaks out of the institution, which is like a really pivotal part of a very pivotal episode, which is also the episode where the girl jumps off the bridge and stuff. Spoiler alert.
But I mean, spoiler alerts after the fact.
Yeah, sorry. I could cut one in earlier.
I don't know. Fine, anyway. Fuck it. Who cares? We're not a TV
If you've
podcast.
not watched it by now, then shame on you anyway. But I mean, it's a poignant show, and I think it's actually, it does make a lot of sense that this band's associated with it. So Mark, you said you actually found the album not as difficult to get through. That was really... This album is an album you have to work at. Like, if you're not working at this album, then a listener is just not going to get it. So I wasn't sure how it would land with you guys.
I didn't find myself having to work at it at all. It was instantly very compelling to me from the get-go. Too long, fucking far too long, way too long.
So I'm going to take issue with that, but carry on.
But most of it I found very compelling, and I enjoyed the way they kept bringing me back, even when they were just doing the same thing repetitively and slightly changing it up and coming back to it, particularly in the longer songs. But yeah, I think I found it a way more compelling than I thought it was going to be, and I liked the uneasy nature of it as well. But I mean, I like that kind of shit anyway.
Very uneasy. Yeah.
I like that kind of stuff anyway, so I guess I was instantly going to appeal to me, you know.
David?
I mean, when this record came out, I really enjoyed it. I found over the years it's not a record I go back and listen to a lot, but I know it's there and I know that I like it. So then going back and listening to it for the first time in maybe a couple of years for this podcast, I was like, oh man, there's some fucking amazing bits on it. It's not a record that you necessarily, like, you don't go to just have a nice time and have a nice relaxing listen to, but I'm really glad that it exists, and there's some just really good bits on it that you know that are coming up, or when it happens you're like, oh fuck, I forgot about that bit.
I feel it's a fully immersive experience. As a record, it's not just a series of singles or tunes or bangers.
It's also a statement as well.
Well,
like for instance, the fact that you've got a 19-minute long ambient track right in the middle of it, I can skip that track, but I like the fact that it's there, because it's a big fuck you to, we are not releasing an album of pop tunes, and you know, we're not releasing an 11-track 35-minute thing. We're good. This is our last record, and it's going to be difficult to listen to.
So I think that's the key point for me, right? Because this album, I think, needs to be appraised on its own terms as a work of art, not a work of pop music. I think the notion of it being overlong is sort of a moot point, because, as Dave says, the fact that they intentionally put a 19-minute long, more than 19-minute long ambient track bang slap in the middle of it shows that the length is not a matter of miscalculation or poor judgment. The length is part of the art. It's like saying, oh, that painting is too wide. It's like the format, the size, the scale of the work. Guernica is a giant painting, but you wouldn't say, oh, it's too big, I can't see it all. The scale of the piece is intrinsic to the art itself, which actually made me confused that they'd released the shorter version of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's on your own record label, and you've taken off the longest song on the record. For what reason? If you're going to stand by your art, then why would you compromise it for on your own label? But what's the reason for that?
I don't know what the reason is for that shorter version, but I do know that this is a piece of art that's another in a series of like progressively more esoteric but artistically pure works, as we've kind of covered going through their back catalogue there. I think that the deliberacy of that scale, of the endurance that it puts you through, because it's not just the length, it's the volume of that. For example, that ambient track, it's the volume of some of the tracks. They are incredibly minimalist. Like, you can almost not hear, if you're driving, you'll be 4 minutes into the tune and be like, is the music still playing? I think that's a really, really fascinating creative decision. And
I think we should look at it also fascinating in the sense that they chose to take it off for one version of the record. I think that's also calculated in an interesting way.
I don't know how much of that has to do with a pricing thing, though. I don't know.
Well,
the
it could
economics
just be
of putting out double albums and people not being able to get them, or I don't really know.
Yeah.
Why would that be a concern though for a band who've clearly spent a lot of their career not caring about that anyway?
I'm not sure. I'm not in their head. But
yeah, it's just a really strange choice. It's to make a calculated decision to do a song like that in the first place, which I admire.
It's only available
then,
in several countries. So I don't know. That was never a release that they were like, okay, this is a separate thing that you can buy. I feel like it may well be, a distributor
it could
in a country will be like, hey, you want to release this in our country, we'll only give you one disc to do it on.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Like, so that may well be a compromise that they had to make to get it released.
Yeah, it may be a case of either the people in that country are not going to get to hear this at all, or we do this. I don't really know, but I do know that there's almost nothing. I would say nothing about this album that wasn't considered. When you look at like the thorough nature of the process around it, like when they started doing it, they wanted to do something that sounded nothing like The Knife. They were playing things like they had instruments that were handmade, which were like bed springs lashed inside
and like
boxes.
Deconstructed microphones.
Yeah,
and things
exactly.
like that.
And they were playing them with like cello bows. Like crazy stuff that they said, like it was completely abstract music until they started layering it up. Did you read about the artwork? I mean, the artwork's fascinating. It was commissioned by a comic artist called Liv Stromquist. They commissioned an entire comic called End Extreme Wealth, and the whole point of the comic was they inverted the sort of 1%, 99% societal thing to make it seem like the 1% are culturally impoverished vermin. They were trying to shift the
rather
focus
than poverty being the thing you look down on, you should look down upon
extreme wealth. Exactly, an inversion of it. And the inversion thing is such a common theme with the band, whether it's gender related, whether it's the fact that this is a super dark album with an extremely neon vivid cover and this extremely high concept art behind it. I just think there's like a fascinating amount of detail behind it. To go through the tracks, it's a long album, but there's not actually that many tracks. The first track, A Tooth for an Eye, again, a bit like their earlier records, is one of those deceptively...
It's quite nice and bright. Yeah. It's a little bit wonky, but
it could have been, for example, on Silent Shout.
Yeah, I've got... it has not fully collapsed yet.
Yeah, it's the most Knife thing possibly in the entire record. It's got a kind of Afrobeat vibe. I did at one point write, this is like a techno Lion King. But
I think I've got that remix actually.
It's kind of cheerful, it's sparse, but there's a catchy bass in it, and there's loads of those kind of trademark percussive melodic samples. It doesn't necessarily brace you for what's coming, but they very, very, very quickly into the runtime are like, nah, fuck this. And then track 2, Full of Fire, which was actually the first single, and that last track, Tooth for an Eye, was the second single. Full of Fire is just a very big change of direction. This is where we're going. It's glitchy, it's sinister. It's got loads of hints of things like Throbbing Gristle, and maybe even like the drums are reminiscent of the band Nitzareb.
Yeah, it's really abrasive. I remember when this track came out, it was immediately my favourite just because it was so kind of violent, and I immediately put it in a playlist with Machine Gun by Portishead.
Yeah, it totally suits that.
And I made like 10 tracks that were all just like heavy percussion noise.
It's weird. It's a total headbanger of a song. Like it's They change the oscillator, so loads of oscillator drifts in the synths that make it really uneasy, and the vocal samples are like flying around and warping. I mean, even the fact that this was chosen as a first single is a big fuck you as well. It's a very confident act, and almost a reckless act. They're like it or don't like it.
Yeah, it's a 9-minute long abrasive industrial song.
Yeah.
This is not going to be covered by Jose Gonzalez.
Yeah. And then again, a bit like Silent Shout, the third track becomes this completely minimalist, almost ambient, weird statement, but a statement in such a kind of
I had
manner.
that. It's like a statement. We are not a pop band.
Yeah. 9 minutes. It sort of reminds me a bit of some of the kind of weirder bands that are on Constellation Records, like the band Exhaust, with loads of droning kind of string stuff, using some of these handmade instruments that they had. It's very kind of experimental, and there's bits of the band Earth in it at times. There's a lot of like weird doom in it, and then just this one little passage of like really beautiful vocals around about 5 minutes. Like Z really leans into how good their voice is.
But then track 4, Without You My Life Would Be Boring.
Also a single by the way.
Yeah, I think this comes in and it's like, okay, we're not going to just make an album entirely of statements.
Yeah.
There is going to be actually some really interesting music on here. And I think I really like the instrumentation in this. I think there's like some mad woodwind shit and the percussion.
The woodwind stuff's almost funny at times. It's like it's really out of tune, but like
this
really
is, I was like, I feel it's like when it goes a little bit Fern Gully or even Avatar. But so I went to see them live on this.
I want to talk about that in a minute, man. I want to talk about that in a minute.
On this tour, and I mean, it was full Fern Gully. We'll talk about it later.
But this track is where the phrase "shaking the habitual" comes from as well. And I think at moments, again, this has got a little bit of the silent shout about it. It's kind of rattly and quite sparse, but another nice change pace. And as you say, they're not saying we're going to make this album unlistenable, but we are going to make this album on our own terms. And this is a little bit of a reprieve. Track 5, Wrap Your Arms Around Me, for me is outstandingly good. An absolute fucking monster in the career of that band. This is the one that appeared in Handmaid's Tale. Big song, really epic, emotional experience. The songwriting in this reminds me a little bit of like later era Nine Inch Nails with a bit of Chelsea Wolfe. There's very, very gothy, very slow. That kind of the snare drum with the snare turned off,
but fully on a lot of ketamine as well.
It's like really druggy,
deep dark walks to it.
It's a stunning bit of music.
My favourite song on the record, probably, I would say. It's like quite sci-fi, which I liked about it.
Kind of a bit dystopian, and which is why it fits with the Handmaid's Tale thing. There's a root note change at about 2 minutes in, which it's just so fucking powerful. And about 4.5 minutes for a song of that stature, it's almost short. It really doesn't hang around when some of the other tracks do hang about as long as they feel like. It's a masterclass, I think, in kind of gothy electro stuff. You're talking about seeing them live in this tour. There's a very, very, very good video or series of videos on YouTube from a show at Terminal 5 in New York City that you can see. And the live performance of this song is unbelievable. The way it's done, again, they only ever toured twice, The Knife. They toured once with like masks and visuals projected. Then they did this tour, which was just a giant artistic venture with loads of musicians, loads of backup singers,
lots of weird new instruments. It was
handmade stuff. Like it almost looks like a boat with a giant string, woven through it. It's really, really odd. 3 or 4 drummers.
So I saw it at the Roundhouse in London, which is a fucking amazing venue.
Oh, man, I'd have loved to have seen this.
And I would say it was like a cross between the Blue Man Group, Avatar, and 5 a.m. at Berghain. It was like it was fucking mental.
Yeah. Seeing the video of this song from Terminal 5, the singers and musicians are all sort of gently gyrating in time. There's something really, really sort of unnatural about it. Like, it's very odd. It's like you're watching one of those weird off AI animations or something like that. And also the reason for having so many singers, like, they're all singing and they've all got microphones, but the idea was partly to try and confuse you as to who Karen is, because Karen is just another one of the singers. It's another sort of attempt to devalue the images of them as a commodity within the band itself. And it's just such a fucking amazing performance. There's a couple other tracks from this album that their performances are outstanding in that show, but the performance of Wrap Your Arms Around Me I cannot recommend highly enough. It's immediately followed by a track called Crake, and again it's just them being fucking awkward because it's 56 seconds long and it's super harsh. Really shrill and just, I think, designed to kind of wake you out of the slumber that last track puts you into. Only to be followed by track 7, Old Dreams Waiting to Be Realised, which is the 19-minute plus epic that we've all been talking about. The one that was missed off of that abbreviated version, which, again, a massive artistic statement, and I think something that really defines the artistic nature of this album, the choice to put it there, the choice to put it in the middle, not last, which would have been, the secret song fucking ending epic indulgent thing. This sounds like a last track, but it's not. It's bang slap in the middle of this. Incredibly minimalist, and I think it's easy to underestimate the skill that's involved in recording music this minimalist. It's so patient, so delicate, so carefully done. It's like 6 minutes before there's even any percussive tone whatsoever in this. Just a really, really subtle, massive bit of art, like a giant gaping black hole in the middle of a beautiful painting, but it's there on purpose. It's there to make you peer closer. It's very, I don't know, there's a really odd artistic effect about it where everything is just so quiet around you for so long, you find yourself in a really weird mental space.
Or conversely, very frustrating, woefully obtuse, and a bit dull.
Possibly.
I think that's fine.
But I think it is absolutely deliberate, though. I don't think if it is obtuse and dull, it's not by virtue of them not knowing that. It's because they were like, this is what you're getting right now. We know this is long as fuck and really hard going and is getting right in the middle of an album that you were maybe right into, but we're putting it here on purpose. And I think that's the difference between an album that's just badly done or badly arranged or whatever, and an album that is designed to really challenge you, which I think also, to be fair, Radiohead did stuff like that. Not to this extent, but on Kiddie and Amnesiac they did a lot of stuff that was just like, what the fuck is that? Like it was that Hunting Bears track or whatever that fucking is, like really weird stuff. But it's followed by Raging Lung, which is another one of the strongest songs on it, one that came out as a single. It's a less brooding sort of sister song to Wrap Your Arms Around Me, I feel. Another one that's brilliant in the Terminal 5 performance, including the weird kind of electronic clarinet that they use in it. More of the snareless snare drum, really serpentine bass line in this song.
Karen's vocals really come through, and you can still see that there's still some pop hook in there, but they decide to collapse everything around it.
Yeah, his voice is really good, and it stands out at a lot of points in this record for me, but this is one of the highest ones, like on this song for sure.
That's the thing, that these both musicians have an amazing amount of technical ability. They choose to deconstruct it, which I think makes it all the more compelling if you're that good. And yet you can dismantle it and fuck with people and fuck with their expectations.
Well, that's totally what they do in this song. Like, they construct the song and then they deconstruct it towards the end.
Yeah.
And it's really,
I love that long
really
ending
clever.
of it, because it does sound like the kind of thing that would just drop off and you'd be like, oh, that was a 5-minute
If they'd had this idea in 2003 on Deep Cuts, like, it would have been a really short, sharp, lovely pop song.
Exactly.
And, like, you know, that hook is there. But then they just go totally down the other route with it. It's really interesting seeing what they do with the same idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 minutes before a chorus even comes in this song, so I like the fact that they let the song run out its own lifespan. They don't end it. The ninth tune in it, Networking, it kind of recalls Olaf's work at his side project, Ori Island, something like that, Ori Island. Much more of a kind of techno-y...
Yeah, straightforward sort of clubby techno-y sort of stuff.
Yeah, more of a purist thing, but this track is very electro, very dark, very jittery. The vocals in this one, it's a good example of them being like chopped and warped beyond recognition, and it's only when they start tweaking the filters that you hear the percussion turning back into vocals and you're like, oh, that's a voice. I didn't realise that was a voice that was doing that. There's a really fucking maddening vocal sneer that comes in about 2 minutes, and it's horrible. Like, it's really uneasy. I don't know what the fuck was going on in the recording studio when they were like, I know what this song needs, but it's a really disturbing sound effect to put into that tune. It's like a fly as well, like a giant fly around your head.
Well, yeah, I had the it's like techno made by bees.
It also ends, that song ends, it's a very subtle but beautiful pitchy drum motif. Like, the drums are kind of pitched to notes, so it's like dum.
Yeah, like, this has kind of, it's like a whispier version of Full of Fire, that track 2. It's a track that I'm kind of unsure about, because there are bits of it that are really cool, but then see, by the end of it, I can just picture a guy in his room at 4 a.m. at a party just showing off his 808 and people getting a bit bored by it, and I'm just like, I like what you're doing, but maybe stop. But
there's a palette cleanser right after it in the form of Oryx, which is just another harsh noise experiment thing, and I think it's also a way to be like, right, get that out of your system, we're going somewhere else next. And they go on to track 11, which is Stay Out Here. It's a fucking really, really good song. This features, was it Shannon Finchers? I don't know.
Yeah, from Light Asylum. Light Asylum are really, really good. Brooklyn based. They've got a couple of fucking excellent electro albums.
She's originally from Portland, though, in Oregon, I think. And she's collaborated with TV and the Radio and LCD Sound System.
Yeah, she's got an amazing voice.
Oh yeah, and it shows in this. It's a really kind of like a minimalist techno intro to this song. It's quite sparse. It has these really deeply uneasy, seasick synths that arrive about a minute in.
I had it like sort of like pylons buzzing.
There's also the vocal refrain in this is very 90s. It reminds
very Depeche Mode.
Yeah,
very Depeche Mode.
Somewhere between electronica and techno. You named some of the bands earlier on, that kind of repeated female sounding vocal sample.
The whole melody is actually quite Depeche Mode in this song, I think. We can walk right off like one of their dark records, I think.
Yeah, it's it's a gothier track as well, so that's kind of in keeping. I also think it's got a really excellent electronic outro. I love the outro on that one. It's
I think this is probably my favourite track on the album. I don't know, it's just got a good gothy darkness to it that works really well.
Now, in terms of like fucking out there, number 12, fracking fluid injection. It's one that really fucking nails its colours to the mast, and they are taking no prisoners with this. This is a long, deep art exercise.
Yeah, it's a soundtrack to a visual art installation that's supposed to make you feel uneasy.
Harsh, odd experimental noise.
Sounds like someone's getting stabbed at the start.
Apparently this one has a lot of the springboks in it. You know, not springboks like the antelope, but springboks like a spring in a box being played by a cello bow. It's really, really odd tune. Again, a bit slightly reminiscent of the band Exhaust, who are on Constellation Records and did stuff like this, although maybe not even quite as weird as this. The 13th track and final track is Ready to Lose. Which is a remarkably understated way to finish this album.
It's interesting. It's like quite a jaunty, upbeat, sort of poppier track compared to what you've just been through.
I kind of get it. Like, they obviously knew this was going to be the last record because they'd said they'd done everything they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they've taken the electro-pop that they were really good at doing and then are just twisting it in this song into what they become. Like, it's got that darkness to it, which it wouldn't have had before. So it's like they're saying, this is what we did and this is what we kind of can do with it.
Yeah,
now.
I feel like on Deep Cuts, right, they are next to the pool drinking Aperol Spritz, and then this song, they've taken that person into the swimming pool and drowned them.
Yeah, totally.
And like, this is the sound of that band being drowned.
So it's weird. I think what you've both said is actually like totally on point with the notes I'd made as well, because you'd mentioned the phrase ketamine earlier on. This to me sounds like something from Deep Cuts played on ketamine. It's got a lot of the kind of African percussive rhythms, but they're much more downbeat. Same ideas, but just slowed down and sort of slightly less energetic. The bass again is really subtle. It's nice, but it's subtle. There's like claps in it, but the claps are not like buoyant claps. They're just in there in the mix. Karen's voice in this is so druggy, and I just think like it does feel, like you said, like it's self-aware. It's taking their earlier work and saying this is where we are now. Here are many of the artifacts of the earlier things we did, but this is how we feel about them now. And yeah, it's like a collage made up of their own paintings or something like that, but done whilst high as fuck.
And of course, the fact that it finishes the record rather than the 19-minute long ambient one, it's like that is part of the statement.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a bold album, and it's not an album in the sense of most of the albums we've done, which are really collections of great songs, and even the albums that are more cohesive are still, you know, even like Trail of Dead, where things all segue and stuff like that, they're still largely, they stand on their own and they're still within normal parameters. But I really feel like judging this on the same basis as those is almost totally redundant, because if those albums are overlong, it's usually by accident, you know, whereas this, I feel, is purposefully difficult in almost every single way, yet also has enough skill and craft within it to make the difficulty extremely rewarding. You know, it's difficult, but yet still very enjoyable, especially at certain points. And I think that just getting into it has been a rewarding experience. I mean, I've tried in the past, and I had never understood really how much of what it was I was trying to digest, and I think it was only doing this, and that's why I shifted. I mean, from going from deep cuts, or wanting to do deep cuts originally, to highlight what an important and an interesting electro album it was, I was like, fuck man, this is the one, because people, I don't think, really appreciate the skill, the thought, the bravery, as well as all the politics and all the kind of, this is a band that really represents something both artistically and ethically. And there's so much to get nutritionally from this band, and this album absolutely is the most concentrated form of like what a high art project this really was. Not just a fun music project, which I think a lot of people, including myself, probably thought at one time, but a really deep, thoughtful, artistic venture. And I'm fucking really, really into it. I've only got more into it throughout the course of doing this. It's really nice to know that there's people making what's effectively a prog album, but making it in a way that is totally innovative, not relying on tropes, not relying on, we're still able to be shaken out of our comfort zones. Even as jaded as we all are, it's still possible to shock.
Yeah. So you think it should go in then?
Oh, I'd love to. Honestly, I'd be gutted if it didn't go in.
Right.
I love it.
Mark?
One man's art, another man's trash, Chris. And it alternates far too much between being really fucking amazing and really boring for me. And I'm on the fence with it. If it goes in, fine. If it doesn't, whatever. I'm not arsed.
How do you feel about other Knife stuff?
I think Deep Cuts would have been a better choice. I think it's probably the most consistent. It's the shortest album they did by far.
You can tell this is a pop punk fan.
But, I thought Silent Shout had a little bit and didn't have as much going for it as Deep Cuts. But I admire this album. Will I go back and listen to it again? I probably will listen to some songs on it, because there are songs on it which I do find myself drifting back to. But as a consistent statement, I think it's just boring on the whole.
Well, do me one last favour and watch the performance at Terminal 5 of Wrap Your Arms Around Me.
Well, that's a great song, so it's going to be great, right?
But honestly, I can't overstate how much more impressive it is when you see that performance. It's amazing.
I think Deep Cuts sets them out as real sort of poppy hook fiends. I think it's full of little gems. I don't think there's a huge amount to get lost in, but I think it was really influential. I actually think Silent Shout is probably their most listenable record.
I agree with that.
It's the one I go back to. It's got that balance of darkness and hooks and techno and dance and coolness that was just really fucking cool.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense that it lies between Deep Cuts and this. Because it does sonically lie between Deep Cuts and this.
Yeah, but I think I'm very happy for this record to go in, because I think it's the perfect statement for a band saying fuck you to the mainstream rather than embracing it. It's artistic and it's political. I mean, it sounds like Aphex Twin and Bjork on a month-long ketamine bender, and what's not to love about that? I think musically, like, if you're into discordant techno and harsh ambient noise, then there are a million records out there that do it for a whole record, and there are whole artists that do it for the whole career. But this brings a lot of different elements to it and puts it all together in a really interesting package, along with their sort of discombobulated pop hooks that they created. And as I said, it's not an album I go back and listen to a lot, but when I do, I love finding things. But I'm really glad that it's an album that exists, and I'm really happy that the band finished with this and then fucked off, because it's a great closing statement to make.
I'm just really unhappy that I never got to see them, and I'm very, very jealous of you having got to see them at the Roundhouse. That would have been spectacular.
Yeah, it's a good one to have been to.
I think it'd be quite sad if they came back after releasing this record. I would feel as though it would kind of cheapen it a little bit. I think.
Maybe, but then again, I get the feeling that this is not a band that comes back unless it does have something to do. It was 7 years till this came out.
Yeah, it may well be that they want to work together again and they release something worthwhile. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I think I have enough faith, given their track record, that if they do come back, it'll probably be for a very good reason. But also, I don't think it'll be like Tool, where they come back and just fucking churn out the same thing to try and make some more money.
But I mean, you've always got Fever Ray, which is fucking excellent.
Which I really do think we'll get to, because I've obviously become more familiar with that in the course of doing this, and it's pretty special as well.
So yeah, 2.5 of us think it should go in. So go and vote for it on the Facebook page. Now,
heads up, by the way, this is probably the hardest I've worked on a Nexus. I really struggled with this one.
I did not.
See, that's interesting.
Tearing my hair out.
I really didn't struggle that much.
Well, there's certain things I don't like going via now. I try to avoid going via movies if I can help it. But like, I was really tearing my fucking hair out.
This is the first time we're seeing Nexus tonight. Will it be the last? What do they have in store for us? Not good.
Why am I here? You're in the Nexus. This is the Nexus. For you, this is what you want.
A lot of dead ends.
You better start. So, what did we choose? Who chose?
Mandy Clark nominated Mr. Blobby.
Mandy. Oh, for fuck's sake, Mandy. Mr. Blobby.
Mr. Blobby was a kind of giant, sort of candid camera type character from a British TV show, for those of you listening out with the UK.
Yep.
He was a big
give it a
pink
Google.
with a yellow spot rubber
suit
and
used
walked
to,
into things.
Yeah, used to walk into things, but used to also jump out and surprise people and roll about and embarrass them. And they did it on celebrities, and they did it on surprise things on TV shows. It's kind of crap, but there was a Christmas single that kept Take That off #1, so it's not without merit.
Not too bad.
Anyway, so The Knife did not attend the 2003 Swedish Grammys despite winning Pop Group of the Year. Instead,
so you won't go down movies, but you will go down award appearances that they didn't go to.
Mate, you've not heard it yet.
No, carry on.
They did not attend the Swedish Grammys despite winning Pop Group of the Year. Instead, they nominated and sent 2 members of the Guerrilla Girls, as we mentioned, the sort of collective that try to highlight the inequalities in terms of representation of women in the arts. And one of those Guerrilla Girls calls herself Dorothy Parker.
Okay, I'll let you off.
And Dorothy Parker took her name from the famous New York City-based poet, satirist and critic. Dorothy Parker, by the way, was one of the people blacklisted in the States in the McCarthy era for her affiliation with the Communist Party in the 1930s.
Not to be confused with Dorothy Perkins.
You better hit that Prince button, because there's a song called The Ballad of Dorothy Parker on Silent Times.
That's twice in one show. So Dorothy Parker. There's an album called Something's Going On by a woman called Annie Frida Lingstad, aka Princess Annie Fridsini of Reuss, Countess of Plauen, aka the brunette woman from ABBA. Okay, so going under the name Frida from ABBA, she recorded a number of solo records. For one of the solo records, she commissioned a guy called Per Gessle, who's the guitarist and songwriter from Roxette, to set one of Dorothy Parker's poems, a famous one called Threnody, to music for the album, which he did. By the way, Frida first became famous on a Swedish talent show in 1967. It was called New Faces. And the day she became famous, the reason there was an exceptionally high TV audience was because it was the day that Sweden swapped from driving on the left-hand side to the right-hand side of the road, and the authorities had encouraged people to stay at home that day.
There you are.
So there was a record audience for the show the day that Frida was on it, and she became really famous. Anyway, so the Something's Going On album by Frida was actually recorded by Phil Collins, who also wrote some of the music on it. And in 2001, Phil Collins threatened to sue comedian, writer and satirist Chris Morris after he was kind of, what would you call it? Lampooned as part of a sketch on a show called Brass Eye, where it was a satirical news show, current affairs show, and Phil Collins bought wholesale into this campaign called Nonsense, campaigning against paedophiles. He was totally ripped on it, and he was not happy, so he threatened to sue Chris Morris afterwards. Other people that threatened to sue Chris Morris for very similar things were Rolf Harris, Jimmy Savile, and Noel Edmonds. And Noel Edmonds was part of an advert segue during an episode of Brass Eye, where the episode ended to go to the adverts, and then there was a sort of fake emergency news report bulletin which claimed to be covering from outside Noel Edmonds' house, where he'd gone insane at a dinner party, and at one point during the news bulletin he throws the head of a TV presenter, Clive Anderson, out of the window. And actually loads of people believed that was real, because they were walking in and out the room. They were like, oh my god, look, it's a news bulletin, Noel Edmonds has cut off Clive Anderson's head. This is mental. Anyway, Noel Edmonds was the main man from Noel Edmonds' house party, or Noel's house party, and Noel's house party was the home of Mr. Blobby.
Great work.
Superb.
Mark?
So okay. I've already mentioned Ugly Betty, so I kind of gave the game away a wee bit. We Share Our Mother's Health from Silent Shout was not
the mother we share.
Yeah, was in Ugly Betty. The Australian actor Alan Dale was in Ugly Betty as well, who spent a long time in Neighbours.
Oh really?
And he was
As who?
I can't remember because I didn't watch Neighbours, but
Chunky.
he was definitely in it. He was in the first 2 seasons of Ugly
Goober.
Betty.
I've had dinner with Tad from Neighbours.
Really?
Have you?
If you go to Australia, you have dinner with one of Neighbours. That's just how it works. Within 4 weeks,
What were
you've
you
probably been on Ramsay Street as well.
So part of the visa process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that. While you're waiting at customs, or
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Let's jump in there. Toadfish is written.
Well, it was Toadfish's cousin, actually.
All right, sorry.
Tadfish.
He was also in 2 episodes of The West Wing where he played the Secretary of Commerce. And speaking, it's a kind of strange link, but speaking of other actors who've moved from daytime TV to kind of Hollywood film and TV, Ian McShane was also in The West Wing.
Oh, I saw this link.
Yeah. Ian McShane played Lovejoy, and Mr. Bobby was in Lovejoy.
For fuck's sake, you've stolen my fucking link again.
Bastard.
I haven't stolen it. I announced it.
Heartbeats, the song that was covered by Jose Gonzalez and was in an advert for Sony Bravia in 2003. 3 years later, the Sony Bravia advert featured a huge amount of paint being exploded out of Tory Glen Council Estate high-rise building in Glasgow. That advert was directed by Jonathan Glazer.
Really?
Who also directed Under the Skin.
Wow.
His first film was Sexy Beast, featuring Ray Winston and Ian McShane. Ian McShane, who was obviously Lovejoy, and Mr. Blobby appeared in Lovejoy. So
I am amazed that Jonathan Glazer directed that.
It was also
he's done a lot of adverts.
Yeah, I knew he'd done loads of them, but
he
I didn't
did
know
the Guinness, the famous Guinness,
The horses.
left, the one with left field in it, and I think also a couple of other Guinness ones.
it was like the most expensive advert ever made. That Sony Bravia advert, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so he started off in adverts and then moved into film. So
that was good. But it's a pity you guys both landed in the same.
They converged on Lovejoy, which happens so often in my life. I always end up in fucking
The thing
Lovejoy.
is, I saw that one, it was there, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to take that one.
Yeah.
I tried to go down another route, but the Lovejoy one just came too easily. So
yeah.
Oh well.
So next week's Mark's week.
Yeah.
Mark?
Going to do Caution by Hot Water Music.
Oh, good one. Good one. Well, Mark, would you care to reach over and dip a name out the tub? We need some more names in.
We'll do a little Facebook request. And if you've got somebody that you want us to try and link to an artist, tell us your name for the Nexus. So, Mark, next week, Hot Water Music and...
Wally from Animal Farm.
Wally from Animal Farm.
Molly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who was suggested?
Libby
Dougal.
Yep.
Thanks, Libby.
Hello, Libby.
So Molly from Animal Farm to Hot Water Music.
That's fine. We can do this.
We've done worse.
We've definitely done worse, yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna head off and try and avoid Nazi gigs for the next 7 days.
Cool.
Just the 7 days though. After that,
next Wednesday.
That's my limit, man. Come on, it's a minefield these days.
Yeah,
Right,
you never know, man. You never know.
Well, I'm going to go see Aphex Twin on Friday, so I'm looking forward to that.
Jeez, I'm going to see the Pixies on Friday as well.
I'm not going to go any gigs.
That's
this
not
week.
a Nazi gig, right? The Pixies aren't Nazis.
Oh,
not as far as I'm aware, no.
Right, okay. I'll have to double check.
Do you know,
Has Frank Black ever killed anyone?
I had 6 music on in my kitchen last week. I was cooking dinner, and if you cooking dinner before 7 o'clock, it means you have to listen to Steve Lamacq. And
you have to.
Yeah. Well,
like
I mean,
law.
And Steve Lamacq was interviewing Frank Black, and the Pixies were in session, and my God, it was the worst fucking interview
Is
of
it
all
a
time.
low energy interview I've ever
Steve
heard
was
from?
just like, so, this new album, did you think about using weird instruments? No. It's just like that sort of shit. Like Frank was like, who is this cunt? I can't believe he used to be famous. I hate Steve Lamacq.
That is not a colourful
Anyway,
mix.
Hi Steve. If he listens. I hate you.
I hope he does listen. That'd be great. If you're listening,
One less subscriber, Steve
Alright,
Lamacq.
you fucking
Alright, folks.
Right, anyway, thanks, bye.